Well, good afternoon and welcome everybody to Pocket Full of Stories, Career Perspective through Story, Finding, Telling, and Listening. I'm Lisa Reichert. I am the Career and Professional Development Lead with People and Organization Development. And I'm excited to welcome you to this third of 6 offerings in this fall's Now Encore series. And the Now Encore series is an expansion of our Now Conference in which we host post-conference workshops with a broader topic focus around career development. And these workshops are led by guest presenters that are both either internal subject matter experts or external subject matter experts. And these offerings are live and virtual and recorded and a little different from the Now Conference. And these are smaller in scope and size. And so we can be more intimate and have deeper engagement. So I am very excited today to welcome our presenters, our co-presenters, and we have Anna Marie Trester, who has a PhD, actually a master's and a PhD in linguistics. And Anna Marie is a story researcher, a speaker, a trainer facilitator, and Katie Nelson, who also has a PhD in linguistics and is a language, culture, identity, and education consultant. And Anna Marie and Catherine, or Katie, have also been Now Conference presenters, and we're thrilled to have them back. And I thank you both for sharing your time and expertise, and especially, using the knowledge around language to help us be more engaging and more powerful and authentic with stories. So thank you, Anna Marie and Katie, and I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, Lisa. We're thrilled to be here. Should we start with our poll just to take the
Sure, let's start there and then we'll do our introduction story.
Yeah? Okay.
So 1 second.
Ooh,
oh, it's there. Cool.
Fancy. So basically, where are you at when you see Pocket Full of Stories? What interested you when you saw that session? What made you want to sign up? So, is it because you have so many? I don't think you have any. Maybe you do. Maybe you just don't know where to begin with them. Or what the heck? Stories? Cool. All right. I like this.
Yeah.
It looks like everyone's voted, so
Cool.
we'll show the results. And everybody should be able to see the results.
I like what we got a good mix.
Well, and I love it because sometimes you hear, I don't have any stories to tell. And I'm glad that this group knows that they have stories to tell. We all have stories to tell. So that's an important, it's a good group to be working with. That's an important first step. So then the question becomes, how do we start telling more stories, being more aware of stories? So cool. All right, here we are, story. And you may have heard when Lisa introduced us, we said that we're about story listening, finding, and telling. So you might already be thinking, this might be a different kind of approach to story. And it is. This is not your, pitch coach session of like, how do you give your elevator pitch? This is not storytelling like, Steven Spielberg's breaking down the hero's journey template into, creating this capital S story. We call it little s storytelling. We're looking for kind of everyday moments that sometimes just go entirely under the radar. And part of the practice is starting to just be more aware of these story moments, because that's how we experience our lives, are in moments. So when you can capture them and story them, they're really powerful tools for showing how you work, how you show up at work. So I can't think of anything more important for a group that's trying to sit around and think about their next opportunity at work, but to be paying attention for stories and listening to them as we'll practice today. We thought we'd start with a story. We thought we'd start with the story of how Katie and I came to be collaborators. And I'm going to tell a story and Katie's going to listen and then model story listening for us all. Okay, Katie and I were introduced by a mutual friend. You may have noticed that we're both PhDs in linguistics. At that time, I was writing a book. I'm still writing that same book. It's about to come out, actually, February 2020. Mark your calendars. 2022. What year are we in?
2021.
Okay, so it's coming out. In that book, I want to share stories of linguists doing interesting things with their skills and training. And a mutual friend of ours says, you might be interested in meeting Katie. So I pop up LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. We were just talking about LinkedIn just before the session started. And I see that Katie was a curriculum development specialist for an Indian, a tribe of Native American Native American tribe. Thank you. And for this tribal community, she was developing curricula based on like cultural heritage, learning, knowledge, and language. And I thought, well, that's an interesting person. So let's reach out. And I wish I could remember like how I knew, but I knew very quickly after I talked to her that we would collaborate really well together. We both, I think we maybe in that first conversation discovered we both used ethnography. That was part of our training. And, you know, she was interested in thinking about career. I research and write about career and bring storytelling to career. And yeah, so we were trying to think of, I was trying to think of how I knew that we were going to collaborate. But then this week when we were just talking about this presentation on Monday, we were just touching base and we had a little moment. So here's a little S story, just a moment, but it gives you a sense for how Katie thinks and you will know why I enjoy collaborating with this person. Okay, so I was on the phone and Katie was on her computer when we were talking on Monday night. And I was on my phone because I was cooking. And, you know, we're talking about the presentation, we're talking about the order, we're talking about the sequencing. And then I said, wait, can I just ask you a cooking question? I said, doesn't coriander have another name? Like what's the other name for coriander? And Katie fires up Google and she fires up, what's a substitute for coriander? Because she already knows that what I'm really asking is, like, I'm cooking and this recipe calls for coriander and I don't have coriander. So I'm asking like, what's the other name for coriander? Because maybe I can figure out, like Katie's like 4 steps ahead all the time. So she Googles what's a substitute for coriander when you're cooking. And then she lists me like all these like fenugreek or like cumin or, you know, this would be good if you're making a curry. Are you making a curry? I was like, yes, I'm making a curry. So there's a little less story that shows you how Katie thinks. Okay, story listener.
So as you're telling the story, you are setting up who we are, how we got to know each other, our connection. But the other thing is you don't give us this big grand explanation of like a project we've collaborated on. I mean, we're collaborating on this project, but rather than picking this grand event or something like that, she's picking that little S story that gets at our working relationship that goes beyond like the final result. So if you're talking to another person, for example, like a lot of people, I think they have this assumption, I have to talk about this big thing I accomplished. But instead, what you were given a hint at is how we collaborate with each other. The way, like Anna Marie asked a question and I went, oh, she's not asking that question, she's asking this question instead. So I went and figured that one out. So you're getting at an understanding of how I work with her, how she works with me, and you're going beyond just the story to our relationship, our collaborative, our ways of collaborating. And and that we have this understanding with each other. So if you're thinking about somebody else listening to this, they walk away with that information. They're not walking away with a story about spices. They're which is what our mode, the vehicle for this story was, a story about cooking and spices. But what you walk away with is a different message. You don't walk away with a message about spices. You walk away with our collaboration, the way we ask each other questions, the way we respond to each other, and why we work well together. So on the other side, what I love is when I ask Anne-Marie the question back, I'm like, you're cooking a curry, aren't you? Or like, are you cooking a curry? And she's like, yes. And like, she follows through with this. Like, she's not going, how could you know that? It's more like, yes, I am. Like, she follows along with this. This is why we get along. I ask her the question ahead and she comes right along with me. So this is, you know, a little window into why we work well together. And it was just a fun tidbit that popped up when we were preparing for this on Monday. So yeah.
Awesome. Anything else you want to add by way of introduction?
I don't know. I don't know. We both have a very wide ranging background, and like that gives us this is one of the things I love about linguistics that I want to just share. Linguistics touches on everything. So my PhD is actually in what's called acoustic phonetics, which I describe as a physics of speech, measuring sound waves. But I did it on a Native American language and collaborated with the tribe and got to know them. And so it wasn't just a, you know, like scientific analysis of speech sounds. It was like, that was the end product, but involved with that was a lot more. And so, you know, Anna-Marie did improv, you know, so like you get we have very wide ranging skill sets. This is why I like linguistics. You can touch on everything. We have this understanding of how to key into different fields, because linguistics basically makes you learn about things that touch on every other field: sciences, social sciences, and humanities. So yeah, that's just a little bit more of a background about us. And yeah.
Well, and I think linguistics is, it gives us this approach that we have to stories, that stories do things. Like stories do things in the world. They and I'm jumping ahead one slide.
Yeah.
Jump
We'll do that and we'll go back to your brainstorming. So do the stories do things.
Just the simple, it's like a mechanistic view of stories. You know, as Katie was beginning to sort of reflect what that little story session did, it introduced us, it introduced our background, it gave you a glimpse into how we collaborate. Stories do things when you share them with people. So for your purposes, we want you to be, as we say, collecting stories and, you know, becoming a little bit more aware of what they do. So today, let's start right away. We're going to have you take out a piece of paper or however you like to make notes for yourself. And we said 5 minutes, but what do we say, 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Just to start, wet the whistle. A great place to think, to find stories is if you can think about a time when you felt challenged, or like you really learned something, or you solved a problem, or confronted a challenging situation. But this is going to be just a free write. So like we say, we'll set a timer for 3 minutes. Just write down.
And it doesn't need to be grammatical. This is just for you. We will use this later to start from. So make sure you remember what you wrote, like write it in a way that you'll remember, you know, but just go with train of thought. It'll spark, the idea is to spark ideas. So, and if you don't, like, we give this idea, think of times when you felt successful or accomplished or challenged, or like you learned something. So this will vary based on who you are as to which one works best for you. But start somewhere and just follow where your thoughts take you. You never know where that's going to go. And you'll hear a story from me later about how that led to a really useful story about my background. So just don't overthink it. That's my number one piece of advice. Don't overthink it. Just go for it. Just go with it. Yeah.
And the idea is that you will be using these with your storytelling at work. So for work. Doesn't mean that everything has to come from the domain of work. You could have an example that comes from your hobby or from your family. And for the brainstorming, don't censor yourself. But just a note, you know, if some memory comes up that's really personal, you don't have to share it. You know,
Right.
that's for you. We're looking for the kinds of stories we're looking for are the ones that can do things for you at work. Because of the session today.
Cool.
Any questions? All right, we're gonna stay all in one group, but 3 minutes on the clock. I'm gonna go on mute right away. I mean, write, WRITE. Go. One more minute. Just keep on listening and writing. Yeah. All right. So hopefully everybody got a few ideas down on the page. And with this idea in mind about stories doing things, we're going to ask you to pick one to share. We're going to be getting into pairs soon. We're going to ask you to pick one of those stories to build a star around. Now, star is a storytelling formula. If any of you, read the career development literature, star is a popular format where you put your story moment into a frame here. So, for just thinking about the coriander story, right? Like the situation was that I was cooking and I didn't have the spice that I needed. Well, I guess the situation is I was cooking. The task at hand is I was making saag paneer. And the action was that I asked for help, but the the thing about Katie's acuity and jump ahead way of thinking, that's the real action here, is that she jumps 3 steps ahead to not just, she's asking this question because she doesn't have coriander. Therefore, I need to help her find some other substitute for coriander. Therefore, I will Google substitutes for coriander. The result was I made a delicious saag paneer. Anyways, you're gonna just play with this. I mean, just like I did now. That was a little bit of a mess, but we're just practicing. We're learning. So,
can I also add something in here about
yes.
this? Sometimes I find it hard at times, depending on your story, to separate action and result. Sometimes, or like some of these are a little more gray in their separation. And so if you're struggling to separate them out, that's okay. Try to put them into the STAR format. And just know that that can at times be challenging. So I am going to tell a story about listening that I can also emulate the
Perfect.
STAR aspect here. I see a hand. Is it about what the STAR is?
It's actually about the larger purpose of this workshop.
Oh, so like what is going to be the end goal as you when you're done?
Well, I'm a career counselor, so I'm familiar with STAR, and I'm just wondering, is your purpose to help people prepare for interviews, or is it more like, I'm just trying to get an understanding of the context. Yeah.
It is not specifically for interviews. It's specific. It's like, how do you tell a work story? You may do that in an interview. You may do that for a future job. You may do that to talk to your colleagues. So if you meet someone in the hall, you have something to talk about. So it's not specifically for interviews. It's definitely useful for that, but it is not specifically for that. So we aren't focusing on STAR in the sense that we want you to use this and focus on it and become experts at it. It's a way to help you organize your story as you're beginning the story finding and storytelling part of this. So it's not necessarily that we want all of you to walk away putting all of your stories in STAR and having it perfect. It's that it's a way to help you formulate and better structure your stories as we go through the listening and story developing process that comes later in the workshop. So there will be time where you get to work with another person and help you develop those stories. And we find the STAR is helpful to give you a framework rather than having nothing to go into that approach. So does that help?
Yeah, I was just wondering if it's like to help us feel more competent telling stories or to notice stories more. Just sort of trying to,
It's all of those, because I think it depends on where you are. So if you're in career, you said career development or career advising?
I'm a career counselor. Yeah.
Career counseling. You know a lot of this. So for you might you won't necessarily take away from this, like, how to tell stories. You might take away a different way of identifying stories or identifying different stories, or maybe it'll help you come away with a different perspective to advise somebody who's coming in who isn't hearing what you're telling them, like they're a different case. It might give you another way to talk to that person. So I think it depends. I see 8 participants, so that means there's 5 of you. Each of you might take away something different from this, depending on where you are and your understanding of storytelling and story finding. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the other aspect to all of this that I think is really important is listening. And I really think that that's very undervalued and it's not understood in the right way, I think, in American culture in general. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about story listening I'm going to give a very brief one and then a slightly longer story. So I would say, like, I always thought I listened to people and paid attention, but I have a very different perspective on story listening after doing my dissertation research with a Native American population. So the tribe that I worked with, the Nez Perce, I worked with elders, and the way that they would, what I learned while I was there was that the more I listened, the more they told me things. They felt like they identified when they felt I was ready to learn things, and they would tell me those things when they thought I was ready. So it was by sitting and listening and hearing what they had to say that allowed me to better understand them and their culture. And I took that idea of just creating the space for people with me and into my interactions with other people. So when I meet somebody new or somebody is telling me a story, you don't actually have to respond back to them in the same way. You know, there's the terminology of like active listening, where you repeat back what the person says. That's not what I'm saying. If you are listening, you create space where that person feels heard, and you ask questions or respond in a way that shows them that you are listening, that goes beyond repeating back words that they say. So for example, you ask for information beyond what they said. You take it to the next level. So an example where Anna Marie did this for me, I worked on a project where I had, we had this big book of stories that did not have a good, the index was like story names, but I needed to be able to find these stories much more effectively. So I was like, well, the easy way to do this is just to classify them and create a complete index with story names, characters in the stories, topics, linguistic topics that were in there. And so I just did it. I used Excel files and I created this thing so you could search and find the stories you wanted. When I showed my colleagues, I didn't feel like they understood what I had done. And it just didn't get recognized. So I just kind of like ignored this whole thing and didn't value it. Anna Marie pointed out that that was a big project that I had undertaken and had done, and that it was actually something that I could use on job applications or could use to tell people that I have the ability to classify data effectively. And that it was a representation of my linguistic training of looking at data and classifying it. I had ignored this story and not done anything with it for like 2 years because I hadn't valued that. But when she heard it, she heard something more, and she identified that and pulled it out. So sometimes the experiences we have that we don't value are actually really useful. And this is where that listening comes in. It's a different perspective. It's another way to view it. And so when you get into groups, we want you to take turns sharing a story and using the STAR format just to help you break down the story to see if it's well told, and focusing on the result. So this is giving you something to focus on, something to start with. But as you're listening, let that person tell the story, but then also ask those thoughtful questions at the end that helps them better identify how to structure the story so that the person can understand it. Because the idea is that you are giving them another perspective, another viewpoint of this story, and the way they want to tell it may not be the way it comes across, and vice versa. So thinking about my experience where I had undervalued creating this categorization of stories at my work, which was a multi-day event and was actually a really complicated endeavor, Anna Marie heard something very different as an excellent exemplification of my skills and my training as a linguist. And that's what that story was to her. To me, it was like I did this thing and it didn't seem valued. So you may have different perspectives, and this is why we want you to listen. And maybe that person listening will hear a different result than what you think is the result of that story.
Can I ask you a quick question, Katie?
Yeah.
What did it mean to you then to hear that other perspective on your story?
I think it took me a while to accept that that was actually a really positive thing. That was something I had done that I could use. And I ended up using it in multiple, I use it in job applications. But or like just telling people about this. And it actually was really effective in those applications and interviews, because I was able to show that I could do these complex categorization of materials, and I just did it because I thought it needed to be done. So it was I value it now in a way that I hadn't before, and that was because the person listening to me saw something that I didn't see. And so maybe
coriander, really, it's you 3 steps ahead of everybody.
so it's possible that like you may not see what that other person, what your listener sees right now, but I encourage you and challenge you to hear what they're saying, to try and, because it's a way somebody will take that story. So we need to be aware of how that story is heard. So do you want to add anything to this, Anna Marie?
I think only the so what we're going to practice now is story listening, and we want to remind the listener that they are the main character. They are the VIP in the breakout session. Whoever's listening is doing the heavy lifting. And one of the reasons that's valuable is you can give the other person, the person who's talking, AKA the storyteller, you can give them a new way of understanding themselves and how they work.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, that's useful for all of the things, as we've been saying, job interviews, but also just understanding how you do what you do.
Right.
Which I think we all can use sometimes reminders, signposts.
So we'll give you 15 minutes. You'll be in groups of 2 to 3. So there'll be 2 groups of you, I guess, because there's 5 of you. And yeah.
Thank you, Denora. Let's say we'll pop in with a reminder that it's time to switch around 5-6 minutes in. But the person should tell the story and try to use, star loosely, just play with that. Again, that's just it's a way to sort of put an idea, a story around an idea, around a moment that you remember. The listener is listening for particularly the R. So you'll have this, you'll break into groups. You have this presentation. If it helps you to look at it in a PDF, you have it in a PDF too. But you're listening for STAR, but especially for R. What do you think the purpose of this story is? What do you think this story?
The takeaway message. Yeah. And we will come back and we'll give time to share like what the experience was. It doesn't have to be to share the story. It can be the experience. We just want to know what you learned from this particular part. So yeah, go ahead and get started.
All right, thanks, Katie and Anna Marie. And I will go ahead and I'm going to launch the breakout rooms.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, I need to share again.
Into your own room so that
Thank
you can
you.
chat, or you don't have to go into a room next time either.
Oh, it's fine. We were actually like, oh, this is useful.
Yeah.
Oh, we can, you know.
Great.
So let's see here. Is this sharing? Is my thing sharing? No, it's not.
No.
Not yet, but let's leave it for a moment.
Oh, yeah. So we can chat.
Yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Anyone want to share? Yeah.
We have a raised hand.
Hi, we were unable to listen to one of our team members because of the time.
Oh no. Do we want to? Well, how do we want to handle that? Do we want to? I don't want to put that person on the spot.
We do have another breakout session where the focus is a little different, but you'll still be able to tell the stories. So that person does not need to, what we'll do is we'll say, if that person wants to tell their story now, they're free to jump in. If they don't, I have no idea who you are, and you can just not say something and you'll be able to share your story in the next one. So I'll give you a minute if you want to tell your story.
I'd be happy to share it. I just wouldn't want it recorded.
Oh yeah.
Can we shut off recording for a minute? Listeners learned about Bridget.
Yes, Bridget. Yes.
Bridget. What did you learn about how Bridget works?
Well,
Oh, sorry, the listeners, your listeners.
Oh, okay.
Your 14 ears.
Recap the question. What did you learn about how Bridget works?
Mm-hmm. What did that story show?
Mm-hmm.
I see a hand.
I heard perseverance.
Yeah.
She got excited about something, and even though she came back and she had to dive into the real work, the spark was never lost.
Mm-hmm.
And she found the perfect time. She brought it back up again. As she's telling the story, she got excited again, and was able to implement something that really seemed to make her come alive.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. What else?
I also heard that she enjoys collaborating.
I heard a lot of we.
Yeah, and also that her colleagues value her. I mean, essentially because, you know, she came back. We can't do this right now, but the fact that you were able to do it eventually. I mean, it's not like it was like, oh, too bad you can't. We're moving on. You know, it was you know, you were taken in as a valuable contributor, and people got on board with it. And you
There's
were
a lot
patient.
of trust.
Yeah, trust. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say like situational awareness. Maybe that's not exactly the right term, but like recognizing the moment when it came, you know, like trusting that the moment would come, and then recognizing it when it did. I'm like, who's more excited about who of you like personas seem really exciting now to me. They're the thing that met this moment. Yeah.
I think also it was that the colleagues and you identified that now was the time because of the pandemic, because we need to have an online persona that describes who we are, that like we need these things now. I mean, I'm not saying you didn't need them before, but the opportunity came and they saw it. And I think one thing, and you don't have to answer this is something for you to reflect on, like, did you bring it up or did somebody else bring it up? I think you may have hinted at somebody else brought it up, but I'm not sure, because I think that could be an interesting point, that your enthusiasm for it initially, like if somebody else brought it up, your enthusiasm made them keep it in mind as something that could come up again later. And that's an interesting point. Or if you brought it up, that could still be an interesting point because you didn't forget about it and you saw the opportunity and then managed to get people interested in it at that moment. So either way, whichever one is the reason, you can use that really effectively to highlight another aspect about you, whether it was you putting an impression on somebody else to remember it, or you loving it enough that when you brought it up again, they heard it and did it. So I think either one makes a lot of sense. So it could be used effectively. Yeah. Cool. Does anybody else want to share anything else that they learned? It could be about a story that was told or about the process of listening. Or the process of telling. And if not, that's fine.
I think there's something about the transformative ability of stories. And like when you're telling a story and you're focusing on the results, that you might, essentially the situation could also be the problem. Mm-hmm. And then, that you resolve the problem, and that for that person on a psychic level, you could even call it spiritual, or whatever, like that there's this shift to like a relief, a lifting of tension, an exuberance that kind of can manifest with that result. There's something sort of beautiful about that. That isn't just about the concrete, okay, these are just the facts of what happened, but it sort of has to do with a human spirit that feels really, kind of wonderful.
I'm so glad we're recording. That was gorgeous. I think that's right. That's what I get out of bed in the morning. Bridget, did you know that all of that was happening in that story that you shared?
I had no idea. But then again, I am in some ways a storyteller with my work. And that's what I strive to do, is to connect the opportunity and the experience that is happening all over for our visiting students, for those that are thinking about coming, and for those university partners all over the world, so that they can understand a little bit more of, as Denora said, we're all humans, a human experience of wherever that may be. And something else was mentioned earlier about the everyday moments and how powerful that can be. That's something, sometimes we're striving for like the big story, and yet some of the traction I'm getting on social media or from students are the everyday moments that happen. And that's really is what's resonating with them all the more. So that's what I'm striving for as a communicator and a storyteller myself on behalf of others, is how can I convey that? How can I be the channel for this experience getting out there to those that are interested in having that same experience?
I think that's a great segue to our next idea, huh, Katie?
Yes, I'm going to share screen here. Oops. There you go. Everybody can see that? Yes. So I'm going to skip to this so that we can just have that there and talk about those.
So Lisa shared in the chat with you all, there's a link. We don't have time to do it today, but there's a quiz called VIA Values in Action. There's a VIA survey that you can take. It takes 10 minutes. It's free. It's easy. And as Katie and I were discussing in the first breakout, you should take it again and again. It changes a little bit. Thank you, Lisa. It's in the chat now. And often what happens is just a reordering of your values in action. But this is another way in to getting at stories and what they do. So it's the tool we're going to play with for our story listening this round, is thinking about the why. We're already there. You guys already got there with the first breakout, because you guys are amazing, and we should, we knew we've done work with Berkeley before. You guys are outstanding So what we were just discovering was a lot of Bridget's why. Like, why does she do what she does? Why does, why does this matter? Why does, every one of those 12 personas matters to, to be able to get that reach that you're going for. Why? Because, this is about what we're talking about is transformational. We're talking about like learning and changing your worldview. Like, what's more important than that? Anyways, so any one of us could approach the same exact challenge. We probably would approach it differently because each of us has our own internal architecture when it comes to the things that are our own values and how they are driving us. So you do this via inventory, and you get one reflection back at you. But then what's really great is being able to put that into conversation with a story. So you haven't taken the quiz yet, but looking at this list, there may be one or two that jump out at you. You might probably already know.
Someone mentioned perseverance for our last story. So like that's on here and that's relevant.
And teamwork was also mentioned. I would guess that teamwork is high up for Bridget.
Yeah. So you'll see, take a minute and look at this and see if a few pop out to you for yourself based on your story. Do you want me to tell my story real quickly about my value, Anna Marie?
Sure.
Am I jumping ahead?
Sure. Give them, do you want to give like just a moment of
quiet? Yeah, give
them
a moment, sorry.
And then go.
Yes.
Did everybody get a chance to kind of make note of at
Mhm.
least one? All right, I see nods. Take it
So
away.
my top value that keeps coming out, I've done it the last 2 times. I've done it 3 times. In the last 2, it was this, and the first time I did it, this was like high up as well, is perspective. So I'm very, very good at perspective taking and understanding other people. And there are 3 little stories that kind of highlight this. So what's nice about these values is you can see how they play across your different stories, and it can help you find unifying themes or understanding. Well, it helps you better understand yourself and why you do what you do, and your approach to things. So for example, Anna Marie and my little story about coriander and spices, that was perspective taking. I understood what she was asking me before my understanding went beyond her actual question. Before she knew what she was asking me, I knew. So I understood what she was doing. Another example that goes back to my story where I talked about creating that inventory of stories. Like, I thought my colleagues would appreciate this, but then when they didn't give me the response I was expecting, I was like, oh, it's not what they actually needed, so it's not as important. So you could almost say, in my ability to perspective take, I almost kind of like downplayed its value based on how they reacted. But then also, I was a teacher for 3 years at Illinois State University. And this came up in a conversation with Anna Marie recently. We were talking about conflict or problems in the classroom. My reaction is, I didn't really have any. I don't really have issues. So like somebody asked me a question is, what is a conflict if you've had, or what is a problem with a colleague? I'm like, I don't know. I don't have any. Well, it's because that goes back to my perspective taking. I understand what they're asking. So even if they're being maybe difficult or saying something in a rude way, I'm like, well, they actually mean that. They don't mean what they said. They mean this other thing, or like, they're upset right now. It's okay. I get it. I mean, sure, I get upset about things myself. I'm not just saying I let everything go, but the point is like, those things are not conflicts to me. They're not problems to me because I know what's actually going on. That's how I see it. So when there's an interview, or when whenever it's something like that comes up, I don't really know what to say. I have to work really hard. And a friend of mine who knows me she was like, oh, well, you did this thing in class, or that thing happened, and that's an example of a conflict. And I'm like, that's not a conflict. To me, a conflict is like a all out screaming match, which of course does not happen. So this is one of those, like, it could help give you a better understanding of yourself and how you approach problems in your stories, and how you tell them, whereas another person's looking for something different than you. So that's why that's why the listening is such an important aspect of the storytelling, because you can tell your story. And I said this before, you can tell your story, and what the messages that you think you're giving may not be what the other person is getting. So having the opportunity to listen to other people, have other people listen and tell you what they're hearing, doing your value surveys, having multiple stories that you can look at and find the commonalities, you can better understand where your story should go. How you can construct them to give the message you want to give, so more people understand what you're giving. So for our next breakout, and we are closing in on the end, we end at 4:30, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just thinking.
So I want to give the 15 minutes for you guys. Maybe, you can share the story, but maybe if you feel short on time, we're letting you end up with a random group. There's 5 of you. Chances are you're going to see somebody you've seen before. Okay. So,
Well, Katie, I was thinking we could give the group the opportunity to vote. We have some content slides towards the end,
right,
that we could also switch gears and offer those in lieu of a second breakout session. You guys were very generous with your participation. So it's a good situation that we're in, but you guys get to choose. Do you want to go into small groups again, or do you want us to give our last few ideas about what linguistics has to offer, what linguists have to offer? I guess so.
We don't mind either way. We want this to be the most useful to you. And when we offered this last time, the one thing people said is we want more time to talk. So that's why we're giving you so much time to talk. It's because that was what they said they wanted. So if you guys would like to do, we would have a little bit of time left, but actually no, 15 minutes from now is 4:30. Excuse me. That's why we're saying that. Yeah. I on my side, I feel like it's more important to get to the framing stories.
Let's do it. Content.
So we're gonna go there.
3 votes.
3 votes for content.
So shall we?
Let's do that.
Okay.
And if we have time, we'll go back. So I'll let you go, Anna Marie.
Yeah. So, to this idea, we were talking about the transformational power of storytelling. When I was staring at that VIA chart, I was laughing because this pocket full of stories was Katie and my pandemic project. This whole idea to do this packaging of storytelling in this frame of, start figuring out a pocket full of stories that you have at the ready. Like if you're heading, say, to a networking event, or you're thinking about freshening up your LinkedIn. Kindness was one of my VIA. That was one of my top, I think it was my second one when I did the VIA. And I was like, kindness? Like, I don't know. I had some work to do around that because I'm 48 years old and I hadn't learned yet that kindness was not weakness. Somehow I got the idea in my 48 years of life that was a weakness. It was a bad thing to have. So I went in and really owned kindness. And I moved during the pandemic too. And one of the first things I did was, who knew? I moved to Tucson, Arizona, and I looked for who even knew. I said, maybe there's an organization here that's devoted to kindness. There is. There's a nonprofit organization here in Tucson whose mission is to teach about kindness. Thank you, Denora. I am kind. I don't know why. I don't know where that came from. I had to do some transformational work. Stories helped me. So the first thing I did, I moved here. I found a storytelling organization. And the first thing I did with that storytelling organization was reach out to this Ben's Bells is the nonprofit. And we reached out to them and we said, could we help you do some story work to help you find your stories, share your stories, to help, do this work that you are trying to do in the community. You're trying to foster kindness. I can't think of a better vehicle than story. So when I showed up to Ben's Bells with my toolkit and what we showed up today with to bring you all as your tools are, next slide.
It wasn't going. There we go.
So hopefully you found a couple little stories. Bridget was so generous to share the one about personae. So I will use that as an example. So there's a story there. Depending on where you're going to use that story, you get to play with whatever the relevance statement is. I could imagine one could be, sometimes it's really all about finding the right moment. I remember a time when I took this training and I came back, I was so excited. Colleagues told me, no, we're not ready. So a relevant statement is something you would use, say, Katie, in a job interview when somebody says, can you tell me about a time as a teacher where you experienced conflict in the classroom? You might say, for me, as a teacher, what I'm really looking for are moments where students challenge assumptions. So what someone else might consider a problem in the classroom is actually what I'm, digging for. I'm seeking it out. I force it to happen. So let me give you an example. So that's a thing to think about when you have your little story. What's the relevant statement that you want to use to be able to toss it in? Sean Callahan is one of my mentors in the story world. He says, don't use the S word. Don't say, I'm going to tell you a story right now. I'm so guilty of this. Don't do it. Use a relevant statement instead. When you're in a job interview, it's right there, right? They say, tell us about a time, and you can just give a relevant statement organically. But relevant statements are very good, kind of just out there in the wild too. When someone's coming at you with a question, or you're just having a conversation, or think about your LinkedIn, your first statement on your LinkedIn summary. For me, work is all about seeking out opportunities to, combine worlds of knowledge, like Bridget, in your case, marketing and study abroad. What was your second? Student experience?
Yes, my position now is marketing and outreach, but initially it was a student advisor and marketing specialist.
Like, you can almost feel somebody lean in when you say, like, it really all comes down to two things for me. Like, you feel somebody lean in, like, what are they? Tell me. So relevant statements combined with a story are just a 1-2 punch. You can also really think about the order of your stories. If we had all the time in the world, we could think about how to play with different ways of ordering Bridget's story, and thinking about where the focus. For me, the most reportable event of her story was for me, it kind of, as told, it almost was the moment where you learned about personae, because you described the room that you were in Spain. Like, we knew everything about the context in which you learned about personae. That's probably the most important event for you. That's the most reportable event. We could consider, though, in using this story, there may be a motivation for pulling the story focus to the staff meeting when your colleagues say, you remember that thing that Bridget came back from Spain talking about? There may be a way that we want to reorder, reframe, restructure your story. And one of the tools that we have at our disposal is thinking about what attention are we giving to which moment is the most reportable event. You can recognize them because time sort of stands still when the storyteller's painting the scene of this. She showed us the room, the windows, the jet lag, right? Like we knew everything about that moment when you learned the thing that became the really important thing. So these are linguistic tools that help story listeners. I see these as twofold, right? It can help you as a story listener to give people around you some insight into their story and what their story is doing. There are also, tools that you can bring to your own. You can ask yourself, what choices am I making here? What have I placed first? When it comes to framing and order, it almost always is like, how did I start the story? How did I, you have to make a choice about what comes first, and what comes first is important, changes what follows.
The other aspect is perspective, and the linguistic term we could pull in here is deixis. So deixis has to do with who's what pronoun you're using. It has to do with the temporal alignment and the location alignment. So if it's something that happened in another place, you're talking about another location. If you're talking about group work versus individual work, you're using I versus we. So if you want to talk about a group project, but you're highlighting your aspect, you might say this was a group project. My focus was this. So by doing that, you're only going to give the listener, they're going to focus on what you did. They're not going to focus on the fact that it was a group project unless you highlight that. If you keep saying we, they'll keep being reminded about it being a group project. Deixis also has to do with temporal alignment, meaning order of events. It has to do with whether it was in the past, the future, the present. So you can carefully construct which things you put in what order in terms of present, past, or future, that allows you to highlight that. So focusing on the tense on your verbs, focusing on like adverbs, so things that come at the beginning, like last year or next year, those kinds of things, temporal indicators that are not on the verb, describing the place something happened. You can use it to effectively create distance between events. Like if you're talking about something that was really unpleasant, you can talk about how much you've grown from it. If let's say it has to come up or something unpleasant needs to be discussed. I'm not saying it will, I'm not saying you should, but let's say it comes up. If you've thought about that story and learned how to create distance from it in the way you tell it, by making sure you're always using past tense, by making sure it's essentially in another location, and focusing on where you are now. So the growth from that or how you got away from it, that can help the listener go, okay, that's not an issue anymore. Like it may have formed the way you are now, but it's not going to make them struggle in where they are now. So all of this has to do with tenses and how you indicate location, how you indicate time. That's deixis, the pronouns used, those kinds of things. So I, you, we, those structures. So all of these are linguistics tools you can use to convey on the grammatical level what you want to tell them.
And the thing that's exciting about this is these are, like we said, we're talking about little S stories. Yeah, exactly, Denora. That's exactly the perfect kind of tell me about a weakness question. Deixis is something to play with.
Yeah.
And it's because these are organic stories. These are stories that are, they're coming up out of experience, lived experience. We're not, trying to like make them into epic tales. We're just trying to see what the stories are already showing. There's learning there too in the before. If you're thinking about you're going to work on a story and create an after, there is actually information in the before. Katie's talking about how you can convey the processing and the but there's learning there for the storyteller too, in realizing this is how I used to tell the story, this is how I need to tell the story.
And I see that we are very close to our end, so I'm going to very quickly do these so that we finish at 4:30. I'm
Thank
just
you, Katie.
get it there. I'm going to go through these very quickly. Vocabulary, the word choice you use. So something that was, I was an academic, I have an academic background. So you talk about students and faculty, but like in the business world, you might talk about those people as stakeholders. Changing your vocabulary to fit the listener is not lying, it's not telling half truths, it's accommodating the person you're listening to so they can effectively understand the story. So if you're working with somebody like somebody who's developed workshops, curriculum, and classes, that's product development, right? You're creating something for a user, your student, your attendee, whatever it is, that's product development. So if you think in the business world, you create a product for the consumer. So like figuring out what the vocabulary is of the person who's listening so that they can understand what you're talking about is a big deal. And this is something I learned is transitioning out of academics. So this is again, perspective of your listener, paying attention to who's going to be listening, and you might change your story based on who you're talking to each time. And then view the story from different angles to identify different approaches to the same story. My favorite example is I worked with a student who built a spaghetti bridge, and he did this. So there's different ways to view this. He did it with a group. It can be talked about in terms of a group project. He did it, he and his group went and talked to the teacher to get more help. So you could talk about it as going beyond what was required. They learned a computer program to best identify the materials needed to do this so that it works well. So there's more to this, but you can tell that same story with 3 different focuses to get at 3 different points. Now you can't tell the same story with 3 different focuses in the same moment necessarily, but that's my point. You can, I like put it on a spinner, lazy Susan in your mind, and turn it around, and it's the same story, but what you focus on gives your listener the most important value. So the takeaway, oh, sorry, Anna Marie, we have this, but quick thing, takeaway.
I can do this in 10 seconds.
Oh, go for it, please.
That today you have learned 3 ways to find stories. We did that free writing exercise, that values inventory, that helps you find stories. And then a smush story was brilliantly demonstrated by Rajat. What about if you take the 2 worlds of your work and smush them together? How does that make you unique? You have 2.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the smush. There's a story there.
Mm-hmm. So keep story finding, keep a journal, log events. I keep telling people the way you act in your everyday life is more important than the major accomplishment. That's important, but like that gives you what is most valuable. And you can develop a story bank and research the environment and the context of where you're going to be using the stories to adjust framing. So understand the key takeaway, understanding listener, keeping a story bank, however often you choose to do it is up to you. But I see the smush question. I think I know Anna Marie is getting at here. And basically it's that we have done things in different environments. We have different jobs, we have our hobbies, we have our different experiences. Look for the overlap, look for the connecting things that bring them together. So if you have, I was an academic, I'm not an academic now. I mean, I do those things, but like I can pull in those stories from when I was an academic, like my teaching experience, how I don't have conflict in the classroom. And I can bring that into a post environment, like after the academic world and see how I use perspective here, or how I still don't have conflict with my colleagues because I address the situations when they arise and I don't see them as conflict. So you can bridge different areas, different backgrounds, find connections with hobbies that shows an interesting dimension to you. You may not highlight that some point, but it's a fun thing to bring in and to see what is your inner motivation, what drives you forward. And I am very well aware of it being 4:32. So I tried to just fly through, and I apologize for the running out of time here, guys, but I hope that this leaves you with enough stuff to move forward and keep with story finding and trying different ways of approaching a story and different ways of telling it.
Thank you so very much, Anna Marie and Katie. Appreciate your kindness and generosity for sharing your time and expertise and your perspective and how we can think about stories and share stories and listen as we hear other stories. And I want to thank everybody here today for sharing and listening with regards to storytelling. I did share the link to the workshop evaluation in the chat, as well as the link to our upcoming workshops. And we will be having our very own Denora Meyer, who is here with us today, presenting our next Now Encore series workshop next Thursday. And that will be Hello Wise Self, Connect with Your Inner Wisdom for Career Clarity and Action. And it's going to be mindfulness and experiential in moving through the body and the 7 chakra system to gain inner wisdom and insight about thinking about your career and developing goals. So thank you for being with us here. And for those who have to go, thanks for the extra time. And if you have any questions, we could perhaps hang out here for a few minutes. And we hope to see you at future offerings. And thanks again, Katie and Anna Marie. Have a great afternoon, everybody. I will stop recording now.